Evening, everybody. This is Dr. Hack, and we are back to double dip on the goat. That sounds weird. So what we're going to do is we're going to study another one of Akiba Rubinstein's games, and we're going to learn the deep strategy embedded in that stuff that he does. Now, one thing you probably should know, before we start this, is that this guy, when he died, he left a book that he was writing in his house, and we found that book. Not me personally. Don't get any ideas. And it was the solution to the game of chess. Bet you didn't know he did that. Except it wasn't finished, though. But it did start. And the start of the book was 1d4. Now you go forward, 50 years? And somebody named Bobby Fischer says e4 is the best move by test? Come on. 50 years before that, the best move was already discovered and written down as the solution to chess, d4. And that's where we are, and this is the best move in the game. We're going to study it. We're going to learn it. Here we go. So we're going to buzz through this opening. This is a very short game, a mini, 23 moves. And we are going to see where the strategy starts here. And it's real close. It's almost happening here. It happens as soon as these pawns trade. And there we go, right here. Okay, pawns traded. So in this one, it's different than the symmetrical game we studied last time. Matt, go back a minute. If white had taken this pawn and black had taken back with the c pawn, we would have that same symmetrical pawn structure that we had in the last game that we saw. The difference between that and this, the reason why he didn't do it, is because this bishop is in the correct place, right? In the last one, that bishop had gone this way, and so symmetry was a good idea for white, because all the black squares on this side of the board, you'll have to go back and see that video. It's actually amazing. So he didn't go into symmetry because this bishop's in the correct place. He chose to go a different way. He said, I'm not going to take that pawn because you might choose to do that. So I'm going to let you do it. And this is the second way that the Queen's Gambit could go. Now the third way, just so we can put it all into perspective, is if we were to take this pawn and he were to take back with this one. That's the third way this game could go and the third bit of strategy that we need to understand. We don't know that yet. We're going to leave that one for another time. It would also be the same if you took this back with a piece. If you were able to keep these two pawns where they are versus that pawn. Okay. And here we are in our pawn structure. Let's learn the strategy to it before we go through the game. All right, so I think the biggest thing that jumps off the page that looks good to me, or looks bad to me in this case, is the black pieces. Look at these three squares. And those are, if you think about the pawns as a fence around your yard, those three squares are inside of his yard or his garden, if you're in England. That's inside of his garden, right? And white has 5 squares inside of his. And so white has more room inside of his fence. And that means that white's pieces move around a little bit easier back there. Why is that important, right? If you imagine putting a piece somewhere outside of your fence, it's often getting attacked and sent back home, right? If you put a piece outside of your fence, it's often getting attacked and sent back home or traded. Squares outside of your pawn structure are not as safe as squares inside of your pawn structure. So the squares inside allow you some mobility to move your pieces around the board safely, which means having more of those squares, more space, allows you more mobility behind your pawns, and it allows you to have the first attack usually is what happens, because your pieces can get into better spots faster. Now you look at these and you realize, this is bumping into that, this is bumping into that, right? This is bumping into that. The queen can't go this way. All of black's pieces are kind of crammed together, and that is causing him all kinds of grief. The way he's going to solve that problem is he's going to have to move one of these pawns. He's going to have to break apart the space somehow. And once that space is gone for white, once the pawn is missing, and we've got more squares back here that black can use, now the bishop will have places to go and things to do all of a sudden. And that means the rook will have places to go and things to do, right? So he can solve his space crisis by moving the c pawn up 1 and trading it, or moving the e pawn up 1 and trading it. Well, let's look at white's point of view now. Okay, and for this one, I think the pieces do get in our way, so I am going to take them off the board. Okay, and can I not move this? Yeah, good. And if we look at this position with just the pawns, and we try to figure out, there we go. We try to figure out how white should play this game. Well, this looks very, very similar to the last video, doesn't it? The pawns are kind of in the same formation, which means if you didn't move the pawn structure, you could just play the same way that we played in the last one. You could play with your pieces kind of cruising over to the queen side of the board. Everything just flows that way. But this is not symmetry. This is not a symmetrical pawn structure. And it is encouraged to change the pawn structure when it's not symmetry. White should, by all means, maybe throw this pawn at it and try to crush some pawns over here. Maybe throw one of these pawns at it and try to get something to move over on the king side so we can attack better, right? Let's just see if white were going to attack, let's say this pawn here. Do a hypothetical. Let's see where his pieces might go to do that, right? And let's just imagine. The bishop that started here, piece of cake. We put it out here. It's aimed right at it. The knight that started here, it's going to take a couple of moves, but it's going to have to go here and then maybe to one of these two, and then we'll reach it. Okay. What about the queen? Well, she's got a couple of ways to get there, right? She could go through this square. She could go through this square. She could go through this square. Lots of ways to get to f7 for the queen as well. So the queen, the bishop, and the knight, those are the easy ones. But how do you get the rooks aimed at f7? Because as amateurs, they're the pieces that we don't use enough. They're heavy, they're fantastic, they're the best attackers in the game almost. And we leave them behind the pawns? What's wrong with us, you know? If you were going to aim a rook at that square, you're going to have to move the pawns. And specifically, you're going to have to move this pawn. It's going to have to run up the board and trade off, and that will open a rook to aim at f7. That will also help the bishop get through, if you think about it. That will also help the knight to have a square to sit on if there's no pawn at f7 anymore. It can't be chased by pawns. It's going to be on e5 for a good long time. So this f-pawn move is actually very powerful as a tool to open up the rooks into the game and start attacking this square. That's exactly what's going to happen in the game. Watch for it. Here we go. Okay. So black castles. White decides that he wants to save his bishop. He doesn't want the knight to hop out here and cause any shenanigans. And so he plays h3. There's no other reason for this move. It's something that we also play in the London system quite often, just to give this bishop a square should it need it. Okay, now we're attacking a pawn. Okay, we better do something about that, right? Think about all the ways you could do that. Just try to list them out in your head. It's a good exercise. Okay, did you come up with this? We can move the queen to 3 different places up here and 2 different places back here. We could bring the bishop back to block. We can move the pawn up. We can move the knight to a4, which would defend the pawn and attack the queen. Did you get all those? There's a lot of them, right? A lot. And did you see me nonchalantly put in the last one that I forgot? Yep, you'll have that. That's a lot of moves to defend the b-pawn. And a couple of them are going to fall flat on their faces. Like we're never going to play b3 because this knight gets loose. And we're going to get it pinned. And we're going to get it attacked a bunch of times. And then we're going to lose it. So we're never playing b3. We're probably never playing the queen out. Because from d2, how could it get up here, right? It's the wrong color. And from c2, it's better. But at the same time, we know what black's plan is going to be. It's going to be to move this pawn up and trade off. And eventually, that's going to bring a rook to that file. And then we're going to lose a turn on when we move the queen again. That is like 10 moves down the road. That's scary long to think about how far that is away. But it's still there. The move that he chose in the game was to move the bishop back to cover. Okay, game on. Black plays rook to d8. We know what he's planning. He's planning to move the c or e pawn and have the rook aimed at a queen. Now, in a bullet game, you would move the queen immediately. You wouldn't play around with this stuff. But Rubinstein calculates like a machine, and he says it's safe. Every time you try to play this, as a matter of fact, he probably wanted him to play it. Because if he plays it, he's going to get a little bit behind. Not very much behind, just a little bit. Okay. And black plays knight to f8. Now he really is ready to play it. If he plays c5, now the pawns can't even trade, right? So the queen's got to go somewhere. And we can guess why he goes to e2. We suspect there's going to be a rook here because of the way this is positioned, right? This one's going to snuggle up right next to it eventually. And this pawn's going to be moved. And so the queen doesn't want to be here. She doesn't want to be on d2 because you can't reach this square from there. She can reach it from here a few different ways later. So e2 is the most efficient place. Yeah, it makes sense, right? Nothing special yet. The knight comes in to g6. Do we want him to take our bishop? Well, if we let him take the bishop, what use was this move later, you know? So bishop h2. Black goes bishop to d6. He wants the bishops off the board. How interesting. Now this is where Rubinstein's strategy gets very deep. Okay, because he is going to start aiming pieces here right now. And if black does nothing, I suppose this could get very dangerous very fast with some sacrificing ideas. They're not ready just yet. Don't worry. He can't do it right now. He could play the f-pawn up and try to do it this way first. And then get some attacks here with the knight and the bishop, right? Okay. So black takes the knight off the board. He says, why wait? I don't know if that was a great choice, because look at this square right here. How does he ever defend that again? Especially when he puts his knight here. How does a knight get from there to there? Not very easy, right? So that's an outpost, and if white puts a piece on it, it can't be chased away by pawns. Oh dear, right? Now we see a knight aimed at the square and a bishop aimed at the square. Not a whole lot black's going to do about this piece for a while. It's in a great spot. Okay. So he tries to defend his f7 square. He sees what's coming. Okay, here comes the pawns. And now we would love to move the f-pawn, but, you know, there's a problem. A pretty big problem. So he moves his king. And here comes the f-pawn. Perfect. Now, I wonder if some of you are thinking, why doesn't he take the knight? He played this move. Why doesn't he take the knight? And then why doesn't he take this pawn? Pause the video if you have to. This is white to move and win something. Yeah, if you said there's a discovered attack on the rook and you can also attack a knight at the same time, double attack. Double trouble. He's going to win something. It's no good. So he can't just trade the knight and trade off. And if he just takes the knight and then doesn't do anything else, now we're going to get a pawn stuck on d6 forever. It's not fun for black to play that way. So he doesn't take the knight. He plays queen to b4. Okay, and here comes the pain, right? That pawn is going to open this now and get some things attacking here. It's already attacking there twice. Black plays knight takes d6. Got rid of one of the pieces attacking f7. Probably a good idea. And then he plays knight to f8. Here's your chance to play one of the greatest moves played. White to move. He's going to win the game. How does he do it? His move is queen to g4. Puts the last bit of pressure on this square. Now it's got 3 attackers and only 2 defenders. So he's going to win that pawn no matter what. And after he does that, he could even play a move like bishop to d5, threatening checkmate here. Or pawn to f6, threatening checkmate here. There's so many ways to try to win this game that black just, his head exploded. Just, and he said, I give up. I can't do it. One more win for the GOAT. I hope this helps somebody. This strategy is hugely helpful for me when I started learning the Queen's Gambit. You guys take care. Have a good one. Bye now.